I just want to confirm you're seeing my screen, John.
I see it just fine. Thank you, Taylor.
Perfect.
Are you there, Taylor?
I am.
Okay. When Colleen is giving her presentation, I'm just going to turn off my camera, all right, and
Yep,
mute
that's
myself.
perfect. And
Okay.
yep, and we'll just have you hop back on during the Q&A at the end.
All right. Sounds like a
Awesome.
winner.
Thank you so much, John.
Not a worry.
I'm showing we're right at 4 p.m. if you want to get us kicked off.
Sure. I'm ready. Here we go. Gawatsi, Keshe. Greetings, everyone, and thank you for joining us here at the Crow Canyon Archaeological Center, a weekly webinar, our Discovering Archaeology webinar series. It's wonderful to have you all join us here, and we are so glad that you will be here to experience a little bit of all the knowledge and all the information that Crow Canyon has to offer. So we are certainly glad that you are here to join us today. And we're going to be going over the reconnecting and relearning culture, language, and history through the Native Teen Guide and Training Program. And our presenter, Colleen Coley, will be our very special guest today. So it's my honor today to be your host and moderator. I am John Jahadi. I'm of the Pueblos of Laguna and Zuni in New Mexico. I greeted you in my mother's language, which is Caris from the Pueblo of Laguna, and I greeted you in my father's language, which is Zuni from the Pueblo Zuni. So we are glad that you are here to join us today. It's very interesting that we here at Crow Canyon have a lot to offer you. We certainly provide a unique sense of knowledge and how we understand the human civilizations that existed here. And in doing so, we want to make sure that we acknowledge those groups of human beings who lived here. The Crow Canyon Archaeological Center acknowledges the Pueblo, Ute, Paiute, Dene, and Hickory Apache people on whose traditional lands our campus sits. We acknowledge the first peoples of the land, the human people, the animal people, the plant people, the water people, the rock people. We ask permission for the first people to enter this space and make a promise that our words, our deeds, our thoughts, and our actions will be honorable to them. Our work is not possible without the indigenous peoples of the past, the present, and the future, and we respectfully recognize and honor ancestral and descendant indigenous communities for their contributions to humankind. Crow Canyon is grateful for all indigenous people and supports the preservation and protection of cultural traditions, ancestral connections, and sacred lands. As a member of the education department, we certainly work to accomplish those goals and help the public as well as anyone who visits Crow Canyon understand that. Our weekly webinars are certainly an interactive opportunity, and we certainly invite you and encourage you to join us. As you notice at the bottom of your screen, you'll see some different icons. And if you'd like to participate with a question or comment or maybe some explanation or clarification, we invite you to do that. So if you wouldn't mind doing that through our Q&A icon, you could do it on the chat. However, unfortunately, sometimes they get pushed down by further and further comments. So if you would put them in the Q&A section, we will certainly work to accomplish those. Sometimes there are those cyber gnomes and cyber trolls that sometimes interfere with our transmission of our live presentations. So if you're having difficulties, we invite you to head on to our live stream that you can find at the address below. It's crowcanyon.org/Facebook. We certainly invite you to do that. I was wondering if anybody in who are participating with us today, if you would perhaps maybe this has been the first time you've joined us, would you mind putting that in your chat, just saying, here, I'm here for the first time. Maybe let us know how you heard about that. And if you're here for the first time, as well as for those who have joined us previously, maybe you've missed some of our previous programming. And so you can log into the website that you see at the bottom of your screen, and you can see many of our recorded sessions through the crowcanyon.org/YouTube website. So we have a lot of information there for you, past presentations, and certainly if you have any questions or comments, perhaps you can direct them to our website address. Our website address at Crow Canyon is crowcanyon.org. We certainly look forward to hearing from you, and we certainly look forward to kind of having you bring it into the discussion with our very special guests today. One of the things that helps us as an organization, certainly we work to accomplish the education, the academic components, but at the same time, the research that's necessary so we can find ways to help us understand the many different diverse indigenous civilizations that existed here. And Crow Canyon provides this to you by bringing our weekly webinar series, the Discovering Archaeology webinar series. And so in preparation for next week's, if you see on your screen there, next week's presentation will be, it says, we are intersection community-based participatory research, Native Nations building, and community gardens. And our special presenter will be Matthew Kirk Tafoya. That will be next Thursday, November the 14th. And obviously, for those of you who have joined us today, you've reminded yourself to turn your clock back or not turn your clock back. So I hope you'll remind yourselves that to join us every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Mountain, and 3 p.m. Pacific Time. And then the following week, we have a continuity through creation, a living culture through the art of the Zuni people. And we'll have a special guest, five artists from the Pueblo of Zuni to join us. And that will be on Thursday, November the 21st. So we hope that you'll be able to join us and look forward to having you participate with that. Crow Canyon certainly works hard, all the staff members, every individual that's here. We certainly accomplish the things that we work to do, the core values, the ethics that are involved in being a research institute. But we would not be able to do this without the help of many of our generous donors and those who contribute for the betterment of what science tells us about the many diverse civilizations. So if you would like to donate, there's a UP code there for you to scan on your phone if you'd like, or if you can go to our website at crowcanyon.org. There are numerous ways in which you can contribute and participate in all that Crow Canyon does. So we certainly respectfully ask that you would consider all the work that we accomplish at Crow Canyon, not just for students, but for the most part for the greater society and for humankind as a whole. So it's really my pleasure to introduce to you our very special guest, and I'd like for her to introduce herself.
Good evening, everyone. hold on here. Greetings. Thank you all for taking time to listen in on what I have to share today. Thank you to Crow Canyon Archaeological Center for the invitation to speak this evening. This presentation is not archaeological or archaeology. I can't even speak. It's not related to the center, but I know they try to invite folks that have Indigenous knowledge or research that is happening throughout the Southwest and beyond to these kind of webinars. So with that, I'm going to introduce myself in my Dene language first. Yat e Colleen Cooley Yanashia, Kenya Ani Nishle, look at Dene Bushes Chin, Twat Heglini a Dashache, Glizatlana a Dashanella, Shot Twaha Dant do Bisto Glij Deshkij Dant Nasha, Kut Ao a Dene Astonishla. So for those that do not understand Navajo, I just introduced my name, my 4 clans, the 2 communities that I come from, Shanto and Blue Gap, Arizona, both located on the Navajo Nation. So with that, I'm going to share my screen here. And thank you again for those that are tuning in this evening. So yeah, the title of my presentation, Reconnecting and Relearning Culture, Language, and History through the Native Teen Guide and Training Program. And I'll talk about the with parentheses in a little bit. So this is just a photo of the canyon, the wash that I grew up around. This is probably a quarter to half a mile located from where my parents still reside. So this is the Shanto Wash. And that's how the community, the name of the Shanto community came from, is basically Shant means like the sun shining onto the water or the wash, this canyon. So that's where that name came from. But I'm sure there's a longer history into the name of the name of Shantwaha. But currently I reside down in the Sonoran Desert. So this is what I get to see throughout the year, which I'm very fortunate to live in this area now and learn about the different species, the wildlife. It's a very diverse area. Get to see some javelina, so many different types of birds and species. A lot of prints of coyote, bobcat, even bear down here. And also, of course, all the amazing wildflowers that are blooming in the springtime. So these are a few photos I've taken throughout my time in the last 2 years, actually full-time, have lived down here. So just wanted to provide a little bit of context for those that are not familiar of the area I'll be talking about. This is, a map of the Navajo Nation here, and the waterways that surround our ancestral territories and some of the Navajo names associated with them. So primarily I'll be talking about the San Juan River. I think there are different names for the San Juan River, depending on the Indigenous nation or tribal nation that folks come from. Even in Navajo, I think there's other names for the San Juan River, but the headwaters originate from the San Juan Mountains and Colorado, and it spans down into New Mexico and then into Utah, southern Utah, and then eventually it goes into the Colorado River. So I just wanted to kind of provide a preview of the area I am talking about. So I wanted to start off by talking about Canyonlands Field Institute. We have a few folks online, Brandy Atine and also Michelle Johnson, Executive Director of Canyonlands Field Institute, and then Brandy Atine, who's also a program manager there at CFI. And so there's a lot of programming that CFI does, but basically they try to provide opportunities for youth and adults to give them access to the outdoors in different ways. They've had field trips, or I guess land-based trips, and also river trips that they have provided to the youth and the surrounding schools. And then some of the adult seminars are focused on specific, maybe geology or archaeology. There's some trips that happen in the Navajo Mountain area where Brandy grew up. So some of them are centered around specific topics. And they invite other educators to come in, like me. I come in once a year for this Native Teen Guide and Training program. And so this program started, the Native Teen Guide and Training program started about 13 years ago. And I think it was an opportunity to get more Native youth out into this area known as the San Juan River. And essentially it's to provide an opportunity for the Native youth to reconnect. You know, I use the parentheses, and to me that means there was a connection, I think, down the lineage of their families to this area, to the San Juan River Basin. So, for example, for myself, I didn't grow up along this river, but I was able to connect and also reconnect to this landscape that, you know, that are part of some of our stories that were told to us. Surrounds our ancestral territories. And so that's where that reconnecting and relearning about this place that is home to a number of Indigenous nations, including Navajo, Hopi, some of the Ute bands as well, Zuni, and a number of other nations that have also migrated through this region. And so this trip itself occurs over a week, and the first 2 days are held on land, and the next couple of days are held on the river. And so there's also guest educators that come in and talk about anywhere from the plants. This past year we had Irene Hamilton, local Dene resident of Bluff, Utah, and she was able to do a writing workshop with the kids, which was really great to see the kids themselves find their voice through writing. It was actually really surprising, and that happened on the very first day. It was really neat to see that. But anyways, the trip itself, and I'll show some photos here in a little bit. The trip itself, there's curriculum around the Colorado Plateau, kind of setting a map in the sand using ropes and little pieces of popsicle sticks that says San Juan Mountains or Durango, and trying to visualize where we're at on the landscape. You know, there's a number of other things. I'll show a photo here in a little bit that kind of describes some of the curriculum, but that's kind of CFI. There's a little bit more. You can find out more information about them and some of their programming going to cfimoab.org. I had my notes, but I can't access it without stopping my screen share. Right. So here's the photo. We have Avery here on the left-hand side. I think he was sharing some cultural knowledge with them. This is when we hiked up Chinle Wash. So we do have discussions in certain areas, like if we go on a hike or if we're at camp and we're waiting for, you know, after dinner. We've talked about water rights, Indigenous history, more about this landscape. We also have the youth learning some of the hard skills like learning how to use a throw rope, and what that looks like when you're actually, if you were going to rescue somebody, as you can see here on the left-hand corner. We also have them work together to cross the river, right? We also on land have work with wild expeditions. They're in Bluff, Utah, and they learn how to canyoneer on, I believe, on the second day. And some of these kids have never done any of these activities. So they're really also feeling inspired and gaining confidence throughout this trip. There's also opportunity for them to learn how to be a paddle captain or just paddle guide, or, using a paddle. And that's where they find their voice too. And some of them gain more confidence throughout the trip. And it's really up to them. We don't really push them to do these things. It's up to them to step up if they're willing to do it. And it's really neat to see the transformation from day one to the last day of the trip. But before I go into some of the trips I've been involved in, I started out guiding back in 2010. I went through a similar program, but it was for adults. And my older sister, Nikki, started the program at Northern Arizona University with some of her colleagues because she was also a river guide, mostly on the Colorado River down in the Grand Canyon. And she saw a need for more representation of Native guides to be sharing their, to tell their story, to share their connection to these landscapes, our homelands, right? And so the program ran for 5 years. I participated the second year that it was running. The training happens on the San Juan River, and at least about 50 or so people have gone through the program. And I would say about 15 to 20% went on to obtain their guide license as river guides or backpacking guides, or maybe led them down a path in a natural resource department, or working for a state or federal agency, whether that's through the Park Service, Forest Service. And so I think that program was pretty successful. And after that, I was hired by Wild Expeditions, formerly Wild Rivers Expeditions there in Bluff. And I worked a full season in 2010 on the San Juan River. And I learned a lot working as a guide. I felt at times a little isolated as an only female Navajo Indigenous guide on these trips. And I later on then found out about this Native teen guided training program. I think it was through Brandy, because at the time she was guest guiding with this program, and eventually worked my way onto the trip in 2021. And that was my first trip I was able to be an educator and guide on. And so, as you all know, COVID was happening during this time, and there were 10 participants that were brave enough to come spend time together on this landscape. And it was myself, Brandy, Alex, who's the education director there at CFI, and Avery, who came all the way down from Montana, that were the guides on this trip. And so these are some of the participants that you see here. And then we have Arnold Clifford here on the right-hand side. He was our guest educator on land, sharing a lot of knowledge about the plants, ethnobotany, and some of the Navajo cultural connections to this landscape. If you ever get to listen to anything he has to share, definitely take notes. I mean, he is just a wealth of knowledge. Always learn something new from him. So yeah, 10 participants, 3 of us were native guides, and then there was one returning. That's Jade there in the front. I believe that was her second year participating. The following year, we had more participants. You know, COVID, it wasn't as scary, I guess. And we had more participants, more people were finding out about this program. So we had 17 participants that year, 4 of us native guides, and then 2 returnees. And so here's a group of us making some fry bread on the right-hand side. And then our youngest participant, she was a really neat artist. And so she would go off to the side once we got to camp, and she would just do some painting off to the side, which was really neat to watch her do that. Last year in 2023, this was a big year. We had 16 participants, in all Indigenous guide crew, and then 5 returnees. And so here are just a few photos. You see Avery's getting his hair braided by 2 of the participants. Actually, Jade was one of the guides, and then Presley's one of the participants that came back. We're trying to incorporate also onto these trips Indigenous foods. And so I was able to bring a blue corn bread recipe. And then we paired it with some chili, some beans, chili beans. This is just a photo of the guides wearing their astral footwear shoes. And then here are some of the participants that participated that year in 2023. Yeah, as I mentioned, this was this was I think a historic moment, because I think Carla's vision essentially was to have an all native guide crew. And this is when it happened in 2023. And maybe a link can be shared, but Sam Carter with River Radius was able to come before the trip, before we got on the river, and then after we got off the river to interview us as guides, and also interview some of the participants. So you'll get to hear their voice and their experience firsthand if you want to listen to that podcast, when we're just sharing our experience as guides, and the kids are sharing their own experience before and after the trip. So we have Avery Old Coyote on the left-hand side, and then Jade, and then Nanaba. So these 2 standing here, they actually went through the Native Teen Guide and Training Program previously. Jade returned a few times. So they actually were the guides that year. And then Brandy standing here in the middle, myself, and then Sage. And she traveled all the way from Maine to join us for this trip. This is, I believe this year was her 3rd year. No, yeah. Is that right? 3rd year, joining as a guide as well. And she's from the Yakama Nation. This year, a couple photos, we had 18 participants, and all native guide crew again, including John. He's in the background here, John Hastine. He was our official photographer. So he took some really great photos of you know, the trip itself. And we had 4 returnees. And so I think for me, it was really impactful. I think every year has been impactful for me, just working with the youth. But this year in particular, I just really felt, a deep connection to the place, to the youth that were on this trip. As you can see, you know, down here on the left-hand side, and the other photo with Avery just getting our hair braided, you know, that's part of who we are as Native people, you know, and also partaking in our traditional Native foods, Fry bread is not traditional, but it's been part of our culture for a long time. So we're trying to, again, incorporate some of that into these trips. There's a lot of cultural knowledge sharing. Again, learning how to row a boat. Sage here is teaching Sedella here to row this boat, and this was going through one of the rapids. And I think just I've shared this with a couple of the folks at CFI and others when I talk about this trip this year. The very last night on our trip, we finished up dinner. We were just enjoying being, we camped at what's known as Ledge Rapid on the left-hand side of the river. It's a big beach area, and had some music playing, and there was a round dance song that came on. And we had some glow sticks, and we're just having some fun there in the dark along the river. And there's some of the girls on the trip, they just started dancing, and more people started to join them. And then we just all got in a circle holding hands, and we just danced. I mean, nobody had to say, oh, come join, or this is the way you do it. We're just being who we are as Native people. And I thought that was really powerful for me. And it's still powerful for me when I talk about it. Because it's a safe space to do that. And I think a lot of the kids also shared that on the last day we were together. We like to reflect with them before they all, reconnect with their families after the trip. And I think one of them that really stood out to me, he just said, I don't feel this connection back at my school, or back in my own community. He was just really, and he teared up. I was, of course, there's a lot of tears shared at the end, but he just teared up and just said, he just felt like, I think it was healing for him. I think for some of these kids, it's healing for them to be in this kind of space and just to be in a different setting, right? And you're building, again, I'm going to go back to building your confidence or feeling inspired or being around kids and guides, and mentors that look like you. And I think that really makes a difference in a program like this. I'm really thankful to Brandy and Carla and those folks that have continued to make this program accessible for the youth and also for us as guides. And this is all the kids that were involved in the program. We had one young lady come down from Oregon. She's standing right here with her flag. She came from the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs Reservation. We had a lot of Navajo, a few Hopi participants, and I'm trying to remember who else was on I think we had one guy. He's not, his photo or his face is not shown here because he was asked not to show his photo, but Richard, he was part of the Ute tribe as well, Southern Ute tribe. And so, yeah, and John Hustine took this photo. This is another one that is really powerful. John Hustine also took this photo. Brandy had mentioned for us to bring some of our traditional wear, and we wore this on our last night. Is that right? Our last night on the river, or second to last night on the river. And we decided to take a photo before it got dark. And so we have the Navajo Nation flag in the background. But here's Sage, and then Cheyenne, and then Brandy, myself, and then Avery in this photo. So it was really, I don't know, for me, this is a really powerful photo because it's like, at least I don't know of any other river guiding program that has an all-native guide crew, and it took a long time for this to happen, right? There's a lot of challenges, and maybe our own stories of how we got to where we are. We're serious in that photo, all stoic, but we can also have a nice smile on our faces. So I wanted to kind of show distinction between the two, because I feel like we're also seen as being so serious and stoic as Native people, and we are, and we can be, but we can also laugh and have a, joke around with each other. And there's a lot of laughter on this trip. Again, we're just being who we are, we like to joke around and tease each other too. So I also want to share this, actually, before I share that quote, the Native Teen Guide and Training Program. There's a lot of, what am I trying to say? I think there are other programs like this out there, and we're trying to make connections with some of those programs. Just got recently connected with Pandion Institute, and they're doing a similar program up there in the Northwest with the youth as well, and reconnecting them to the Snake River, the Salmon River. And we just got to talk to them just yesterday, actually. Brandy, myself, and Alex talked to them yesterday. And we're just sharing our own stories, lessons learned, how we can share resources with each other, potentially doing like a guide exchange. And I think that's where Avery connected us with Bianca, who came all the way down from Oregon, because Bianca is a participant with Paddle Tribal Waters. It's a kayak school up in the Northwest. They're doing some amazing things with the youth as well. And so she was able to come down. Her dad drove her all the way down to Utah to have her participate in this program. It's a big investment for her father to do that. But I think I can't say enough good things about Canyonlands Field Institute themselves. I think it's a great organization to get both the youth and adults immersed into the landscape and learning about the landscape, connecting or reconnecting to these waters. They're doing some science focus trips as well with the youth. Like I said, for some of the adult seminars, I don't know if any of you have participated in any of those adult seminars. They have several that they offer throughout the year as well. But yeah, I'm sure Brandy and Michelle can maybe add more to that, maybe in the chat box, but definitely check out their website at cfimoab.org. And when going back to Sam Carter in the River Radius podcast, he interviewed us and had a lot of questions for us as guides and also for the kids. And this one really stuck with me, what Avery mentioned. And he said, when you build a relationship with these places and within these spaces, you don't have to do it at the expense of your identity. You don't have to do it at the expense of your culture. You can actually feature it. So, like, trying to share that also with the youth, not just in this space, but in other spaces, right? And hopefully some of that resonates with them and that they can carry that with them, or that they feel inspired to come back the next year. And some of them have. There's a few that have returned 2 or 3 times throughout the last couple of years that I've been part of the program as a guide and educator. So with that, these are some ways to connect. I have my own business website. You can connect with me if you're on social media. And then Canyonlands Field Institute also has their website and their social media listed here.
Let me take off myself. All right. Oh, fantastic. That was an exceptional presentation. Thank you very much. I have some questions because I'm thinking as an educator, I wanted to learn a little bit more, but I want to certainly take a little bit of time to encourage many of our participants who are joining us here. I see 36 on the screen. I would like to know if there was anybody else that I'll be glad to ask a question or inquiry of our very special guest, but I see that Lorraine has one. So let me read it out for her. Lorraine writes, it's very inspiring to learn about the program. How do kids become aware of the program? And how are the trips funded? And lastly, are there plans for expansion of the particular program?
Yeah, thank you, Lorraine, for your question. The kids, I think they mostly become aware of the program through their parents. Some of the kids, we ask them, how did you find out about this program? And they say, my parents signed me up, or my parents is the one, my mom or my dad is the one that found out. So I think the parents are the ones that find out about the program and they sign up their kids or ask their kids if they want to participate in something like this. Currently, the program itself is funded by the Browning Foundation. That's also listed on the website. You can learn more information about that. Maybe Michelle or Brandy can answer that in the chat. They can share a little bit more about other funding sources. I think some of it are donations as well. And then plans to expand. There's been potential conversation of doing a second trip because in the last 2 years, more parents, more kids are finding out about this program. So it's increased the number of applications that have come in. And so there's hope to, yes, expand it. But that's in conversation right now.
And I was wondering, perhaps this might just kind of tangent off of Lorraine's question, and I'm going to get to Alicia's question in just a little bit. What are the age groups? What are the grades or the parameters of the students that are are participating in the program?
Yes, thanks for that question. The program is available for youth between ages 13 and 17 years old. So whatever grade that they're in, it's usually between 13 and 17 years of age.
And is there a limit to the number of students that can participate, or just how many apply?
Yeah, yes. Currently the capacity is 18 participants.
Okay. One of our fellow educators here at Crow Canyon also has a question, Alicia Benali. She asks, do students have to be an enrolled member of a tribe to participate, or do they simply have to be a descendant of a tribal member?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I'm going to have Michelle or Brandy answer that, if that's okay.
Okay, let's see. See from Michelle. I see on the chat she wrote here. The program is funded from grants, and you mentioned the Browning funding, and perhaps maybe Brandy can could help you with that particular answer as it applies to what Alicia asked about tribal membership. While we're waiting to see if Brandy or Michelle can contribute, as an educator, one of the things that I'm oftentimes interested in is the curriculum. And you mentioned it earlier that maybe, I don't know if you had a slide that kind of outlines the curriculum. You said you had the first couple of days on land, and then you had some part of the rest of the program on the river. Could you kind of perhaps elaborate a little bit about what the curriculum entails?
Yeah, so CFI, they have a number of curriculum already set up for some of the other programming that they do with youth. So there's a number of things around like light pollution. There's one on mapping the Colorado Plateau. So you can do that using rope or whatever that you have available, but typically we use pieces of rope, put it on the ground And then we give them a booklet that shows like the different features within the Colorado Plateau, the cities. Brandy was able to incorporate like the tribal names, like the Hopi, Navajo, like where they're located on the landscape, or even some of the mountains on the landscape, and the waterways. And so we have the kids actually participate in that and do some of the mapping on their own, using the books, those little booklets as guides. Um, there's, again, some of the hard skills like tying knots, learning how to use a throw rope, how to row, particular to this trip, learning how to set up camp. A lot of safety skills involved in that as well. And there's a lot of other curriculum that CFI has available, again, like for some of their other programming that they do in the field. But we incorporate on this trip, I think eventually, I think we want to indigenize some of that curriculum, incorporating different ways of learning. What does light pollution mean, right? What does that mean for us? Or, astronomy maybe, and the indigenous stories around that. For example, because we're outside and it's dark outside and you can see the stars very well out there. So I think eventually it will, we'll try to indigenize some of the curriculum as we move forward.
You're on mute, John.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad you answered it that with the inclusion of astronomy, because as an educator and mostly as a science educator, oftentimes it's important for us to consider the fact that the same stars that we get to see now, the same sun, the same celestial bodies that we see even in the year 2024, are the same celestial bodies that our predecessors, our indigenous ancestors, were seeing the same thing. So we're just fortunate to have that. And Brandy wrote here to answer Alicia's question. She says we have the students fill out a questionnaire that asks what tribal affiliation they're associated with. However, no proof is required. So that's pretty interesting that it can be equally inclusive. And oftentimes, I don't want to take up too much because I hope there'll be others who'll be having some questions or comments for our guests today. But I was wondering, is there a component of your curriculum that includes things like STEM constructs, science, technology, engineering, that we can sort of make a connection to the fact that our predecessors as Indigenous people were using science principles to sustain and maintain their societies and their civilizations?
That's a good question. Not at the moment, but again, we do have, educators like Arnold Clifford and others that have some of that knowledge, the indigenous knowledge, and they come in to share that with the kids. Um, I'm interested personally in potentially incorporating water quality testing. And so, we're along this river corridor. There's a lot of people that use the river for different things, whether it's farming or whether they're pumping out for irrigation, or for their animals. And so, and this river corridor has been impacted, by mining, by the Gold King mine spill, right? There's a number of things that have impacted this landscape. And so it'd be interesting to learn, and some of it has been done, I think, by San Juan College and other researchers, but it'd be neat for the kids to look at that and what does that mean for them. Maybe incorporating indigenous knowledge with Western science, and analyzing that.
Mhm. You mentioned indigenizing and indigenous knowledge. in that many of these cultures obviously had resided in what we now call North America for a millennia. I was wondering, you mentioned also about connecting with environmental science and climate change. How are you working toward helping students understand their impact as certainly students? I mean, we drive in cars, we have our cell phones, and all of these things. Sometimes we live in a disposable society, but nevertheless, keeping in helping students understand that the impact we make certainly impacts all of us. How are you working to accomplish that?
We don't, at least for this program, we don't really focus like on the impact itself and talking about that because on the river, we incorporate the leave no trace principle. So that's included, and we let the kids know, to kind of leave the landscape as we came into it, right? So that's I think that's part of the impact that we share with them because there's a lot of people that come down this river, whether it's a private trip or a commercial trip. And so we want to make as minimal impact as we can so that the next user can enjoy this place. But yeah, CFI also does composting. So we do talk about that with them. So I guess we do incorporate a little bit of it. We talk about the importance of that, where's that going? And also I think providing um, providing information about, I think we do talk about some of those impacts and some of the kids are interested in it. We only have so much water that we take on these trips, so we want to encourage them to drink enough water, but also like we don't need much water to live our daily lives, right? Um, and I think some of that conversation comes into when we're mapping out the Colorado Plateau and we have them look at what they've created um, on the ground in the sand and say, okay, why is this river and watershed going through this area? Or where is it leading to? Who are the users of those waterways? We talk about some of the mining that's happening in those areas. And some of these kids are learning that in their own schools as well, or maybe they're learning it from their parents or some of their peers. So I think, yeah, we do incorporate it throughout the trip itself.
We have another question from one of our Crow Canyon staff, but I just wanted to tangent off what you've been talking about, especially along the river with your students. Do you see any evidence like trash, debris, things that you say, that's just evidence of the fact of how negligent sometimes people can be?
Yeah, we do see little bits and pieces of it, and we try to carry that out with us if we do see some of it and provide that example to the kids and say, maybe it blew away from the last camp or they left it here. But not as much. I mean, I've been on this river a number of times and I typically, I mean, it's very minimal. If I do see something, it's just little pieces of micro trash that I see. But for the most part, it's people actually take very good care of the landscape.
Oh, that's good. That's good to hear. Let me bring in Kate's question. Kate is one of our other staff members at Crow Canyon, and she asks, do you foresee getting youth into the Grand Canyon? And could one of the outfitters facilitate that? Maybe even contribute with supplies and or support? And then she's also wondering about expanding the program to other rivers.
I know that Grand Canyon Youth provides, I think, an opportunity for youth to go on to these trips in the Grand Canyon. It's not focused on a training program. I think that's different because it's such a huge river. The Colorado River is such a massive river. I think starting them at a younger age I'm not sure what that would look like. I think for now, CFI is focused just on the San Juan River to answer your question.
Okay.
Mhm,
You mentioned also that you had been doing this for a number of years now, correct?
mhm,
Okay. Have you
yes.
seen any impact either to the water level, to the water quality, perhaps maybe any indicators of climate change that have impacted the San Juan River, which indigenous people have relied on for several millennia?
The water level changes from year to year, and as mentioned earlier, there's other impacts that happen upstream that affects what's downstream. There's, the impact of the dams or the dam. It has definitely impacted the last 17 to 20 miles of this section of the river um, just before Clay Hills. I've definitely seen that. I think it's getting um, there's more sandbars or there's more silt building up. Um,
Mm,
and I think also what I see is the plants along the river corridor, so the tamarisk and the Russian olive, they definitely have a huge impact on the river and the water levels too. I know there's been introduction of the tamarisk beetle to try to mitigate the tamarisk, but what I've seen is, yeah, they eat the leaves off the trees, um, but it doesn't kill them. It doesn't remove these tamarisk trees. The tamarisk need to be taken completely out of the ground in
mhm,
order
certainly.
to to destroy them if that's the end goal. Um, but yeah, I've seen, some changes throughout the landscape. There's a little bit more impact, unfortunately, what is known as river house or snake house, the ancestral dwelling site. I think there are some folks definitely, I don't know if Crow Canyon has been involved in some of that, trying to maintain the preservation of that area, but I've seen more I think impact to the ground because you can actually drive all the way into that dwelling site. So I think that's where I do see some impact happening. As far as the water quality, I'm not sure. I haven't been involved in any of the water quality research or testing. So it'd be interesting if we could incorporate that in the future.
As part of the program.
Hmm.
Yeah, the two species of river trees, like I should say, are the invasive, correct? They're not indigenous to the
Yes.
river itself, correct?
Yes.
Just before we're coming up on toward the end of the program, but Michelle writes, make sure it is Michelle. If anyone wants to look at the chat, Michelle has some information there talking about STEM, the STEM curriculum, the funding from the uh, Utah Division of Indian Affairs that provides some funding. And as we get near toward the top of the hour, and perhaps you could tell us a little bit about how you would like to perhaps maybe engage with the public, some of our viewers here, that perhaps maybe will help you accomplish the goals and the things that you want CFI to accomplish with the students that are going to be joining this program.
Yeah, I'm just resharing what Michelle was putting in the chat. I think she's only sharing it with the host and panelists, so I'm putting it to everybody. Thank you, Michelle, for providing more more information about the curriculum and more about CFI. Um, but yeah, I think just what I shared about my own experience and also a little bit about the experience of the youth. These kind of programs are really important, not only for them, but for us as the educators and guides. So I think, if anything, I would like, the folks that tuned in, the folks that are maybe will watch this recording later to see that this is one way to inspire and empower the youth. I think what I'm getting at is in different spaces I've been in at conferences, community meetings, we talk about the youth. We say they are our future. They are going to be the next leaders in these communities, but in a lot of those spaces, we're not including them in those spaces. We just talk about them and say, oh, their youth are important. We're doing this for our youth. But I think these kind of programs can actually I think, set them up in a way they can be maybe successful later on or find their voice. I think part of it is finding their voice, and to be confident in who they are and where they come from. I try to emphasize that, as an Indigenous person, that was my upbringing and my teaching. Wherever you travel, wherever you end up, know who you are and where you come from, or remember who you are and where you come from. But definitely for this program to continue, love to get any support, financially or just awareness, spread the word about this program. There's a lot of great information on the website. Yeah, so if we want to work on expanding the program, we'd love to gain your support.
And so Alex wrote donate, definitely. If you would share that website address screen that you had previously for those who might show an interest, and perhaps maybe, as you mentioned, others who might view this later on, they will see an opportunity. And it would be able to, on your website, it would show someone who's interested how to donate and how they can contribute and participate, correct?
To show, sorry, you want me to show it on the website where to do it?
Yeah, you had that one slide that showed your website.
Oh, that's my personal website. And
Oh,
then
okay.
CFI website, I can share that in the chat.
Terrific. Yes.
Yeah.
Like I said, obviously we've had, looks like
Yeah.
a few people showing an interest, perhaps maybe
Mhm.
to help spread the word and also maybe garner those donations that could certainly contribute to the program.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Yes. Michelle is sharing something else as well, is to that all their programmings require disconnection from devices like our phones. I think that's one of the important aspects, things to take away as well. Just immersing yourself into the landscape and really connecting to the place that you're in. And we really recommend for the kids before they go on these trips, like we take their phones away and just to be present
Oh
there.
no. Oh no, no video
They're-
games. Bummer.
No, only the guides will have their phones, but only for photos. But yeah, really immersing and connecting to the landscape that they're in and learning about it is, I think, what they strive for sure.
And certainly we've talked about, we're getting ready to close here in just a little bit, but certainly there are you want to reach out to students. But what about educators? Someone who wants to, who's an adult and wants to contribute to what you do. Is there a call for that, or how can they work to accomplish that?
That's a good question. There's no call for that. I think it's more Brandy and I have some of our own connections, and I think Brandy's really done a lot for the program since she has started working with CFI. And so I think she found Avery and Sage to join in the last couple of years as educators. I mean, they're coming from further away than the Southwest. So I think if it does expand, we definitely know there are other Native guides and educators out there. Again, making connection with other programs like the Pandion Institute, Paddle Tribal Waters. There's definitely some connections and sharing of resources that we can do with others.
Fantastic, really informative, and sounds like you're all doing a fantastic job. So again, your website address is last time.
Brandy just shared it in the chat.
Okay, terrific. So everyone look at your chat. Brandy shared the website address to connect with us.
But
We
yeah,
really appreciate.
verbally, yeah, just
Go ahead.
verbally, it's CFI, so CFIMoab.org. So those are tuning in or listening to the recording. That's what the website is.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And certainly congratulating all the effort you and your staff are doing, and certainly for the interest of the students who are there to appreciate and understand the connection between land and water and culture. All of those things are connected. So again, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon and this evening. We look forward to joining again next week. Look again for our website at crowcanyon.org. And again, for any previously recorded sessions, crowcanyon.org/YouTube. There's a number of recordings there. So it was my honor again to be your host and moderator today. Thank you very much, Colleen. And we appreciate all of you joining us, and hopefully everyone will join us again next time. Take care,
Thank you,
everyone. Have a good
everyone.
week. Bye-bye
Bye.
now, everyone.